Love is not the absence of conflict, but when love becomes the absence of freedom, that is not love. That is possession wearing a mask. You can be wrapped in someone's arms and still feel like you're disappearing. You can hear the words, "I love you," and still sense a chill behind them, a silent threat. Don't change, don't grow, don't leave me. Many people think a toxic relationship is loud screaming, slamming doors, public chaos. But often it's quiet, subtle. It's the way you pause before speaking your truth, the way your laughter fades in their presence, the way your soul whispers, "This is not love," and yet you stay. Because they need you, because you once saw the good in them, because you've mistaken pain for passion. Or worse, you've started believing you don't deserve better. But let me ask you something. If love costs your peace, your freedom, and your dignity, is it still love, or is it emotional captivity? When I said, that is not love, that is possession wearing a mask, I meant that toxic relationships often mimic love, but behind the mask you'll find fear, control, and the slow erosion of the self. Toxic love does not scream at you. It whispers. It rewrites your story slowly until you no longer recognize your reflection. At first, they adore you. They praise your mind, your fire, your freedom. But over time, that freedom becomes a threat. Your joy becomes a distraction. Your independence becomes disobedience. They say they love you, but only when you fit the shape they need. They don't want you. They want a version of you they can manage, control, tame. This is not love. This is emotional tyranny disguised in soft apologies and justifications that feel like affection. And still, we stay. Why? Because we are terrified of being alone more than we are terrified of being erased. But let me tell you something. Love that demands the death of your soul is not love at all. It is fear. It is hunger. It is ownership masquerading as devotion. And that is what I meant when I said, when love becomes the absence of freedom, that is not love. That is possession wearing a mask. Let us unmask it together. When I wrote that love without freedom is not love, I was not speaking in metaphor. I was diagnosing a disease of the modern heart. You see, in my work, especially in the art of loving, I argued that real love is an art. It requires discipline, patience, responsibility, and courage. But what most people call love is none of those things. It is fear of loneliness. It is ego hunger. It is the desperate attempt to fill the emptiness inside with another human being, not to meet them as equals, but to possess them like property. And this is where toxicity is born, not in hatred but in dependency, not in malice but in emotional parasitism. Toxic relationships are not about too much love, they are about too little selfhood. When two people cling to each other to avoid their own inner voids, what results is not intimacy, but mutual imprisonment. To love and to let be, that is the highest form of love. But in toxic unions, the letting be dies first. And with it, your freedom. So let us explore these 5 signs, not just to name what's toxic, but to reclaim what's human. Welcome, my friend. You have arrived at Erich Fromm, a place not for passive listening, but for courageous reflection. Today we speak of a wound that too many carry in silent, toxic relationships. Not the kind we laugh off in movies, but the kind that slowly dismantles your spirit while you convince yourself you're fine. You see, love, real love, is the act of giving, not taking. It is freedom, not fear. It is growth, not stagnation. Yet, in modern life, so many relationships rot from the inside because they are built not on love, but on control, projection, and pain dressed up as passion. We stay because we are afraid of being alone, afraid of the unknown, afraid that no one else will ever choose us. So we accept crumbs and call it a feast. We confuse obsession for depth. We trade authenticity for approval. But what does that cost us? I will show you 5 psychological signs, not just patterns of behavior, but mirrors into the very structure of toxic love. These are not just red flags. They are alarms of the soul. They are the soft betrayals that over time become a silent funeral for the self. And as we go through each, I ask you not to judge yourself, but to finally see yourself. Let us begin. Number 1, toxic cling when love feels like ownership. Love in its purest form is an act of freedom. It says, I see you as you are, and I cherish your being not as a possession, but as a partner in life's dance. But toxic love is different. It clings, it suffocates, it does not wish to see you grow. It fears your freedom. Too often people mistake this desperate clinging for devotion. They believe that the more someone demands their presence, their attention, their compliance, the more they love. But I say to you, that is not love. That is possession. It is the desire to own rather than to nurture. In The Art of Loving, I wrote that love requires courage. The courage to be free and to let others be free. Toxic cling denies this courage. It is born of fear, fear of abandonment, fear of loneliness, fear of losing control. It chains you in invisible bonds and calls it commitment. Imagine a garden where the flowers are not allowed to grow beyond a fence, where roots are strangled and leaves cannot reach the sun. That garden is a toxic relationship. You are the flower, struggling to breathe beneath the shadow of possession. When someone loves you truly, they celebrate your independence. They desire your happiness not because it satisfies their hunger, but because they recognize your humanity. But toxic cling turns love into a cage where every step you take away feels like betrayal. You begin to shrink, to silence your dreams, to dim your light, all in the name of keeping love. But this love is a shadow, a chain, a slow erosion of your soul. Ask yourself, are you loved for who you are or for who you are allowed to be? If love is demanding you shrink to fit its grasp, then what you face is not love but captivity. And captivity, no matter how tender the chains, is poison to the soul. Number 2, emotional manipulation. Love as a weapon. True love is an act of care and respect. It nurtures growth and honors the other's autonomy. But toxic relationships turn love into a weapon, a tool for control, disguised as devotion. I have seen this all too often, the subtle erosion of will, the quiet terror of walking on eggshells. Manipulation is not always loud, it is often silent and insidious. A sigh, a look, a withheld word, all wielded to bend the other's spirit. In The Art of Loving, I warned that love must never be reduced to a transaction of power. Yet toxic partners use emotions like currency bargaining with guilt, shame, and fear. They make love conditional. If you loved me, you would. If you don't, you're selfish, uncaring, or worse, unlovable. This is not love. It is emotional tyranny. Imagine living in a house where the temperature shifts unpredictably, warmth suddenly replaced by cold. You never know what will trigger the frost, so you learn to walk carefully, suppressing your true feelings. This is the hallmark of emotional manipulation. It is the slow poison that erodes your confidence, your voice, your very sense of reality. You begin to question yourself, am I too sensitive? Am I the problem? This self-doubt is the weapon's sharpest edge. You find yourself apologizing more often, censoring your needs just to keep the peace. You become a prisoner of a love that demands you lose yourself. Ask yourself in your relationship, are you free to speak your truth without fear of punishment? Or do you find yourself constantly walking on a tightrope, afraid to upset the balance? Love must never feel like a trap. When affection is wielded as a weapon, it is a sign your heart is under siege and true love has fled. Remember, love is not a game of control. It is the art of freedom. And where there is manipulation, there can be no true love. The moment you realize this, you take your first step toward reclaiming your soul. Number 3, erosion of self, losing your identity to survive. One of the most tragic signs of a toxic relationship is the slow, almost invisible erosion of your selfhood. You begin as a whole person, vibrant and alive with your own dreams, desires, and thoughts. But over time, to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to feel accepted, you start to change. You sacrifice parts of yourself, your opinions, your hobbies, your voice, until what remains is a hollow echo of who you once were. This is the survival mechanism of the oppressed soul. In The Art of Loving, I explained that love must grow from a strong, independent self, a self capable of giving and receiving freely. But in toxic love, the self becomes weak, fragmented, and dependent. The toxic partner's demands become your boundaries, their fears, your cage. You lose your identity in the name of love. You learn to mirror their desires, hide your pain, and silence your truth. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something just for yourself? Not to please, not to appease, but simply because it fed your soul. When your identity is swallowed by another's expectations, you cease to exist as a separate being. And in that disappearance lies the deepest loneliness, the loneliness of losing yourself within the very person who was mean to cherish you. This loss is more than just emotional, it is existential. The soul starves when it cannot express its authentic self. You begin to ask, who am I if I cannot be me? And yet, paradoxically, this loss is often invisible from the outside. Friends and family may say, you seem different, but the internal struggle remains hidden, locked behind forced smiles and silenced cries. This is the slow death of self, not by violence, but by invisibility. And it is perhaps the cruelest form of toxicity, because to lose yourself is to lose the very foundation of love itself. But know this rediscovery is possible. Even the deepest erosion can be healed when you dare to reclaim your soul. The journey back to yourself is the most radical act of love you can undertake. Number 4, the cycle of blame. When accountability dies in toxic relationships, blame becomes the currency of conflict. It's easier to point fingers than to face one's own shortcomings. But when blame dominates, accountability disappears, and love withers in the shadows. I have observed that true love demands responsibility not just for one's actions, but for one's emotions and their impact on another. Yet, toxic partners deflect blame like shields, casting their faults onto you, as if din, bin, bin, if your pain is their weapon. It's your fault I'm angry. If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't feel this way. These phrases are not cries for understanding, but traps designed to keep you captive in guilt. In The Art of Loving, I emphasize that love requires maturity, the courage to say, I am responsible for my part. In The Art of Loving, I emphasize that love requires maturity, the courage to say, I am responsible for my part. Without this, the cycle of blame spirals endlessly, leaving no room for healing or growth. This blame game creates a toxic dance where neither partner can step forward without fearing attack. It builds walls instead of bridges, silences instead of dialogue. Each accusation chips away at trust until all that remains is suspicion and resentment. Ask yourself in your relationship, is blame used as a weapon to control or avoid responsibility? Or do you see signs of true accountability, where both partners own their flaws and work toward mutual growth? When accountability dies, love becomes a battlefield. But where it lives, love becomes a sanctuary. True love requires the courage to look inward, to admit fault without fear of retribution. It demands vulnerability, a willingness to be seen imperfectly, yet wholly accepted. In this sacred space, blame dissolves and healing begins. Choosing accountability is choosing freedom. It is the refusal to remain shackled by resentment and the invitation to rebuild trust, piece by fragile piece. Remember, love without responsibility is merely chaos masquerading as passion. Only in embracing our own flaws can we offer the gift of genuine connection. It is through honest reflection and humility that we break the chains of bitterness, opening the door to true intimacy. And when two souls meet in this space of shared accountability, they create a love that is no longer fragile but fierce, a love that is real, enduring, and liberating. Number 5, the illusion of control, when power masks insecurity. In toxic relationships, control often masquerades as love. It is the shadow beneath affection, the silent dictator behind the smile. One partner wields power, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, in an attempt to bend the other to their will. But this is not love. It is fear dressed in dominance. It is insecurity shouting to be heard by any means necessary. I have long argued that freedom is the essence of human existence, the ability to be oneself, to grow, and to relate authentically. When control invades love, freedom dies. The toxic partner's need to control is a desperate attempt to fill an internal void, a void born from profound insecurity and isolation. They grasp at power to feel safe, to mask their own feelings of helplessness. But this control is an illusion, a brittle facade that fractures under the weight of genuine intimacy. In The Art of Loving, I wrote that love is an act of giving freely and without conditions. When control enters, love becomes conditional. You will behave this way. You will think like me. You will not cross these lines. Boundaries are necessary in love, yes, but they must come from respect, not fear. When boundaries become weapons, the relationship becomes a prison. Ask yourself, do you feel free in your relationship? Or are you constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that any misstep will bring punishment, criticism, or withdrawal? When control rules, the relationship loses its soul. It becomes a transaction, a power struggle, a game with no winners. Yet the desire to control often comes from a place of pain. The controlling partner is not merely a villain. They are a frightened human being, desperate for certainty in an uncertain world. But this fear, when expressed as control, destroys what it seeks to protect: love itself. True love requires vulnerability, trust, and the courage to release control. It demands the strength to face uncertainty and to embrace the other's freedom as a gift, not a threat. When you break free from this illusion, you reclaim your own power, the power to choose, to express, and to be. You learn that love does not bind or suffocate. It liberates and transforms. In this liberation, you find your true self again, not the self molded by fear and control, but the self that is authentic, creative, and whole. And here lies the paradox of toxic control. The more you try to hold on, the more you lose. Only by letting go can love breathe, grow, and become real. Remember, power without love is tyranny. But love without power is chaos. The dance of love requires balance, a balance struck through respect, trust, and the humility to surrender control in favor of connection. When you recognize the illusion of control, you step into a new kind of freedom, a freedom that nurtures your soul and invites true intimacy. This is the final step, the breaking of chains that bind, and the opening of doors to a love that heals rather than harms. It is the liberation of the heart. It is the reclaiming of your life. Transformation arc. Imagine for a moment stepping out of the shadowed labyrinth of toxicity and into the clear light of self-awareness. This is not a simple path. It is a journey that demands courage, humility, and a fierce commitment to truth. When you begin to see the signs, the narcissism, the blame, the control not as attacks upon you, but as cries of pain from another human being, a transformation begins. You stop fighting for survival and start searching for freedom. You stop reacting and begin choosing. It is like waking from a long, suffocating dream where love was a battlefield and discovering a garden where love is a sanctuary. This journey reshapes your soul. You learn to reclaim your voice, not in anger or fear, but in calm, assertive clarity. You learn to set boundaries not as walls, but as gates that protect your peace. You learn that vulnerability is not weakness, but the bridge to deeper connection. With every step, the heavy chains of toxicity loosen. Your heart opens wider, and you find that love, real love, is not a trap, but a gift. This transformation is not merely about ending a toxic relationship. It is about beginning a new relationship with yourself. A relationship built on self-respect, compassion, and honesty. And from this place of strength, you begin to attract the love you deserve, love that nurtures, uplifts, and empowers. This is the liberation of the spirit, the reclaiming of joy, the rebirth of hope. Now let us bring this ancient wisdom into the immediacy of your life today, this very moment. What must you do? First, recognize the toxicity. Name it without shame or denial. See the signs for what they are, not your failure, but the failure of a system built on fear and control. Next, reclaim your power. This is not about domination, but about choosing freedom. Freedom to say no, freedom to walk away, freedom to demand respect. You are not a victim of circumstance, but an agent of your own life. Set your boundaries fiercely and lovingly. Boundaries are the soil from which self-love grows. Without them, you cannot cultivate a healthy relationship, not with others and not with yourself. Begin to practice radical honesty with yourself and those around you. Begin to practice radical honesty with yourself and those around you. Speak your truth calmly, clearly, and without apology. In this honesty lies your liberation. But understand this transformation is not easy. It will unsettle the familiar. It will shake the foundations of what you thought love was. And that is precisely why it is necessary. Because only when the old illusions fall away can true love take root. So start today. Choose yourself. Demand respect. Break free from the chains of blame, control, and narcissism. Remember, the greatest act of courage is to love yourself enough to walk away from what harms you. This is not surrender, it is victory. A victory that echoes through every fiber of your being, calling you home to who you truly are. Take that step. You deserve nothing less. Remember this, love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. It is an attitude, an orientation of character which determines the relatedness of a person to the world as a whole. Toxic relationships are not failures, they are lessons. They reveal what love is not, so you can seek what love truly is. To love yourself is to refuse to settle for less than respect, freedom, and growth. It is the bravest act of rebellion against a world that often teaches us to tolerate pain and silence our truth. You hold within you the power to transform your story from one of pain to one of profound healing. Step into that power. Choose love that liberates, not confines. And know this, in choosing yourself, you honor the deepest, most authentic part of your being. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a life lived fully, fiercely, and freely. As I have said, the task we must set for ourselves is not to feel secure, but to be able to tolerate insecurity. Embrace your freedom even when it feels uncertain, for it is in that uncertainty that true love, the love that heals and sustains, is born.